Today, we find Jesus walking along, and there is a great crowd following behind him. And Jesus spins around, the gospel makes it sound like, and just says what's on his mind. You cannot be my disciples unless you're willing to take up your crosses. It's not a very enticing and inviting statement to say. It's almost like pushing the disciples away. You cannot be my disciples, he says 3 times in the course of this gospel today. You cannot be my disciples if you don't accept what that means. See, Jesus is aware, I think, of all of the people that are following him. And in this great crowd, there are certainly those whose hearts are in the right place. But there are also those who are kind of paparazzi, who are there to see the celebrity, who are there to maybe benefit from being in his company or to receive what he gives. They know this is the miracle worker, or this is the man whose words are good to hear, or this is the man who multiplies bread and feeds people when they're with him. We can get a free lunch. We don't know why all of these people are following him. And Jesus wants to make it clear that he's not interested in celebrity followers. He's not interested in the paparazzi. He's interested in disciples. And if you want to be my disciple, it's not a casual thing. It's not something that you are simply going to just be. But to be my disciple means that you will do what I do. That's ultimately being the disciple. For many of the prophets or teachers in Jesus' time, and there were many who would stand there along the river or out in the wilderness or in the city center and get up on their soapboxes and preach a good message, people gathered to listen. They got stuff out of it. They became the students. Jesus doesn't want students. Jesus wants disciples. And he wants disciples who are going to be him. He wants extensions of himself. He doesn't need their adoration to lift him up. He doesn't need their swooning to make him feel good about himself. Jesus needs an extension of himself. He wants to be in many places, through and in and with many different people. And so he asks his disciples, or he tells them, you must now find your cross and carry it after me. That I am going to pick up the cross and I am going to carry it, and you must do the same. I remember some years ago someone asked me, why does it seem that the Christian message is all about the cross? Why is it all about pain and suffering? Why is it always about sins and confessing? Why is it always about penance? Why doesn't it seem so joyful or happy or do what you like and enjoy? Why do we have to suffer? It's a good question. But I think sometimes the question might be phrased a little incorrectly. On the one hand, we have suffering, a cross. And on the other hand, we have joy and living life. And the question is, why do we have to be this one and can't be this one? It's an either-or question. But I think as Catholics, we tend to approach most questions like that, both and. Our faith is both cross and resurrection. Our faith is both suffering and trial and joy and life. Our faith cannot have one without the other. We cannot just be people of the cross. What do we have to live for if that's all our life is? And we can't just be people of the resurrection. What are we rising from? What is the point of all of that? But the cross gives meaning to the resurrection, and the resurrection gives meaning to the cross. And as Jesus invites us to accept our crosses, He's not inviting us to suffer for suffering's sake. I want you to be miserable. I want you to suffer because I'm going to have to suffer, and you need to know how it feels, that sort of thing. It's not what he wants. He wants us to accept our crosses. Now, where do those crosses come from? They don't come from God, but they come from a world that is not aligned with God's will. And so we receive these crosses of pain, of suffering, of trial, of temptation from the people and the circumstances and the world around us that's not aligned with God's will. That's our cross. And Jesus wants us to accept that cross to transform it. Take that cross from the world and transform it from that instrument of suffering and death into joy and resurrection. Take your crosses and master them. Carry them. Don't just leave them behind for someone else to stumble over or to cause someone else's life to be miserable. Pick it up, own it, transform it, and make a miracle happen. Jesus took the tool of execution and made it the doorway into heaven. And there are keys to heaven being dropped all around us. There are crosses laying everywhere. We just have to pick up that key in order to unlock the door. But if we run away from those keys, we find the door locked. Jesus reminds us to pick up that cross. It is a wisdom that doesn't make sense when we first approach it. We want to run from that suffering. We want to run from that trial. Solomon, in the first reading today, prays for that gift of wisdom. Give me wisdom, Lord. And in the end, he realizes all of my planning, all of my wisdom is going to end up in failure because I am limited. But the reading ends with that line that speaks of God's Holy Spirit will complete everything. God's wisdom will complete everything. Jesus offers a couple examples of guys sitting down to prepare, to plan. And he invites them to consider their limitations. How much can you do on your own? And at some point you find there is a limit. Jesus gives us the tool to go beyond our limits, to go beyond our pain, our suffering, our end. He gives us now this cross. Transform that cross. Take it and love it. Love through it. Love those who form the cross. Love the world that hands you that cross. Pour out your love as he poured out love on the cross, and that transforms it, and it changes it, and it makes a miracle. Jesus doesn't want disciples who just listen to him. He wants disciples who will be him. Take the sufferings of the world and make miracles out of them. Change them so the world is less of a cross, less of a place of suffering, and more of a place of joy. That's why we have to be both and. We have to be both people of the cross and people of the resurrection. And not in two separate hands, but we bring them together. I'm going to take this cross and make it life. I'm going to take this cross and make it my key to heaven. I'm going to take this suffering and bring a joy out of it. That's the man and woman who can be a disciple of Jesus.